In a corporate world defined by how quickly we can achieve things, the art of an effective summary has never been a more important set of skills for instructional designers, e-learning developers, scriptwriters, and really anyone conveying anything to try and master. I was lucky enough to sit down virtually with Heather and Erica from getAbstract, genuine masters in crafting effective summaries, really to dig into what is it about summaries that makes them so effective, what is it about getAbstract summaries specifically that make them stand out, in my opinion, and finally what advice they would give to us L&D folk instructional designers on crafting effective summaries. Before we get into that conversation, I'd really like to thank them for their time, but also let you know that I previously made a video comparing getAbstract and Blinkist, two different summary apps that are readily available and well known. You can find a link to that video up here, or maybe up here, or somewhere. Magic. If you do enjoy this video, and maybe if you watch that one as well, consider subscribing to the channel, hitting some like buttons, and maybe even hitting the bell so you get notified when I create more videos here on the channel. But without further ado, let's get started. So, Heather, Erica, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. Heather, I know you're the global head of editorial, and Erica, a senior managing director, both at getAbstract. So let's dive straight into the topic we're here to discuss. Summaries, the power of summaries, why do we bother? I guess using summarized content is a good place to start.
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much for having us. It's always really nice just to talk about what we do. We, as editors, we're usually in the background, and we don't often get the chance to talk about our craft. So it's really nice to have the opportunity. So summaries, yeah, why bother? It's a really good question. I have to admit, when I started at getAbstract 10 years ago, I came from an editorial background, but even myself now as the head of the department, I had to be convinced at the beginning. I was really wondering why do people do this? What is it for? In my mind, I really had like something you used at university as a kind of a pinpoint what a summary was. And then at getAbstract, what we do is we do summaries for business professionals. And that was at the time a new concept for me. But over the years, I've really seen why people use them. I use them myself the way they're intended to. I think probably the biggest and simplest reason people use them is because they save time. They give you the content that you need, the lessons that you need to learn, the information you need to make a better decision, to move forward with a project, to go in the right direction in a short amount of time. And when you're working and so many busy professionals, you know, you have a life, you have maybe a family, you have a job, you have all these demands. Sitting down to read a 300 book on something like leadership or project management just might not fit into your schedule every time you need to learn about a topic quickly. And summaries, they're a gateway to that information. I think they do a great job at helping people move forward quicker.
They also tell you what you need to read. If you're looking for information on a certain subject and you read 3 or 4 summaries, you know which book or article is going to resonate with you. And we always provide a way for them to get to the whole thing.
Yeah, I think I think that second point as well. I'm quite interested in that because sort of a discussion I've had a lot of times. I think every instructional designer, L&D person has had this conversation. You've got the SME or business leader that wants to include absolutely every bit of information known to man about this topic in this supposedly 15-minute interaction you're going to have with these people. And then you've got probably our argument, which is what is the bare minimum we can provide to get the job done. And then there's this discussion about further reading and if you're interested, go off and do this. I think there's a lot of discussion about, certainly with L&D, about how effective that is, about do people in the real world actually go off and do further reading or engage with something, even if they find it interesting. So maybe I'm not sure if either of you have any insight around that. Is that do you see people doing that? Is it something that actually happens, or is it a kind of another one of those in L&D's brain? People are so interested they go off and read for hours in their own time, but does reality agree? I guess is the question.
That's a really fair question. I'll take that one if that's okay, because I have two sort of backgrounds that help me answer that. One is that I spent a year at getAbstract working as a customer success manager. I wanted to go on to the sales side. I wanted to go into customer service. I wanted to be working with L&D leaders and see how are people using our content. Like, I spent years making it. I wanted to see it in action. And what I saw there is that people do go off and buy books. I mean, but they buy them when they really are going to read them and are motivated and passionate and interested in a topic, which is the best you can hope for. That's what you want. The other side of that, just data-wise, is we collect statistics on who goes on from our page onto Amazon or to other like affiliates that sell books. And we can see if they bought the book through our website, and we see that happening a significant amount. So it definitely gets people buying the book or going to the original source when they really need it.
The other place where this comes up is I was speaking to a young woman who's having a big job interview, and they said to her, we want to talk about servant leadership, not a concept she knew at the time. I could send her 2 or 3 abstracts, and that led her to Kenneth Blanchard's book about servant leadership, and that prepared her for her interview.
And that I think, yeah, is really interesting, because Ken Blanchard's a fantastic example of this. I trained to be a people manager at the time when Ken Blanchard's books were the way to do that. You were becoming a manager, so you were given a big pile of 1-minute manager books, and that's where you started. That's no longer the case. So when I reference them, people are like, sorry, what is this? It's weird how these things kind of go in cycles, right? And it kind of disappeared, not from everyone's minds, but I think certainly from L&D's mind, all that stuff's kind of gone. And I've found being able to offer those summary level kind of suggestions has almost allowed people to get back into using that content, because giving people a stack of books now is seen as, oh, you can't do that. That's not good L&D practice. People don't learn from books anymore, not in 2023. Setting the nonsense of that aside for a moment, at least, this seems to be a great way to get people into the idea that you can read and learn. You can still engage with all that old content that, yes, it's not e-learnings and videos and podcasts, but it's still very valuable.
When the summaries told her, as happens with a lot of our readers and clients, where the information was that would fit what she needed it for.
And I think that's maybe that's maybe the sticking point on a lot of books now, isn't it? Is if it's a 200-page book, how much of that do I need, realistically? All of it's great, obviously, you would hope, but not all of it's going to be valuable at every moment. Brilliant. So I guess kind of the next question on from, are they valuable? I think we've kind of established, yes, there's value there. Is that what goes into doing this? Because I think it's very easy to go, oh yeah, a summary, a short version of all the content. How difficult could that be? And there are different ways of approaching it, of course. And I'd really be interested to hear what's the getAbstract approach. What is it that makes a getAbstract summary totally different or more valuable than another type of summary?
We have a system of managing editors who are subject area experts. The managing editors, and who are language experts. We're in 7 languages. The managing editors are our curators. They know their field. They follow the books. They follow the publications and the videos and the podcasts in that field. So the managing editors select what we're going to cover. Now, a lot of this we discuss. Heather's my boss. If I'm not sure about something, we'll talk about it together. Once we have picked something we're going to cover, the managing editor assigns it to a writer. All of our abstracts, long and short, are written by human beings. AI is a great research tool. It doesn't write for us, just so you know. I keep telling people every single book abstract, there's a man or a woman sitting on a couch reading a book. The writers are individuals. They're all either subject area experts or experienced journalists, sometimes both. And they attack books different ways. Some write as they go through. Some write at the end of each chapter and then look for the overall arc. I get back books from writers that look like they've been run over by trucks. because they're highlighted and they're dog-eared and they've been split wide open. But it's okay. That writer's really eaten that book. And then they give it back to us in as concise and organized a form as they can. Often with a book, the author will tell you what he's going to tell you, and he'll tell you, and then he'll tell you what he told you. The abstract's only going to give that to you once, but that writer has to read it all the way through and find the best way to present that within our format. We also, to be sure that we're accurate to the source, our writers give us a page number citation for every sentence or every paragraph or statement of fact in an abstract. The abstract then goes to a content editor and to a copy editor and to a proofreader. And those editors check those citations back to the book, because we also can't add anything to the abstract. It has to be what's in the book. And we have to get that accurately and completely, but not embellished. And when it's been through that process and we have a finished manuscript, and we get rights from the publisher, then we create an audio and we put it online. If we have questions about it, we brainstorm. But the writers now are familiar to their editors. We have a really communicative system, and I think it leads to a good creative product, because we're mostly all the writers now are experienced and they have a handle on what a summary is supposed to do.
Awesome. I think certainly for me, I'm sure for many people kind of watching and listening to this, that's a lot more than we might think goes into, a summary of a book. I think it's fair to say, certainly, I whenever I've written summaries of learning experiences or content pieces, it's never been that involved. So that's a really, really fascinating insight. And just it's a bit of a how long's a bit of string question, I guess. But what kind of timelines does that realistically look like?
I think generally we assign a book. The writer uses either 2 weeks or a month, and to put it through the editorial process and the permission process, probably another month. But when we need it for a client, we can accelerate that pretty efficiently.
That's again, I think, really telling, because I think, and there will be those who disagree with me fervently because their practice is so much better than mine in the comments. The summary is often the last thing to get written in a learning experience. Sometimes that's necessary, that's just the way the cookie crumbles, as it were, but it is not given that length of time. It is very much seen as, the disliked cousin of the main body of content. It's well, we've covered it, so we can just kind of, a couple of bullet points, there's your summary, off we go. So that's such a robust approach is quite a stark difference to that in my experience anyway. So you were saying about sort of the different roles involved around sort of writers and then editors, and the writers being subject matter experts. Do you find that in that, I think it might not be the case at all, that it's quite difficult sometimes for them not to bring in their broader understanding of the field or things that they've picked up from all the reading that they have done to be an SME in that field?
That's why they cite everything in the abstract. And they will call me and sometimes say, this isn't a good book. His information's not right. It's not where you want to be. And we'll leave that book behind. I mean, they're the frontline employees. They see what there really is there. I've picked the books. I've gotten to know them well, but I haven't read them. The writers read them.
That's fascinating. So that's, I think, again, kind of thinking about practice in the L&D field, that's a much more collaborative experience than I think a lot of us have quite often. And again, tell me if you've heard this before. It's usually for us, it's a couple of PowerPoints or a training manual delivered by business SME. Make it training. And there's your collaboration. You were provided content, and it sounds like you've got much more of a back and forth between writer and editor to sort of balance the, I guess, business need, the content need, their expertise, your expertise, that kind of thing.
I think we do, and we also have a very good collegial feeling in our editorial department. We meet together every week. on Zoom. I mean, we're all over the world, but we meet together every week. And we really have a good sense from Heather and from the other people in the company of what clients are looking for and what they need.
Again, that's I feel this felt like it might be the quickest section, but this is fascinating. This is almost like a ways of working bit, because we spend a lot of time struggling with exactly that, understanding how to balance that demand of the content and its inherent complexity, the practical realities of how much time can we give to the project and how much scope is there, how long can this thing be, but also what do users really need. And so often the, those kind of the people who hold that information just are not in the same room, they're not in the same conversation, or there's someone trying to play relay between two groups that don't talk to each other at all, and it makes things so much more difficult. And I think when you look at the quality of the abstracts and the summaries your team create, it's pretty evident that there's that really joined up approach to communication. So I guess you may not want to answer this one, I don't know. What challenges does that level of communication kind of, because it's not easy to collaborate among many people who are all very confident and very competent in their fields, right? I know I work with a team of such people, and sometimes a discussion can become a very energetic discussion when you disagree on what the way forwards can be. So what do those kind of calls look like?
I have to say, we have those conversations occasionally too, but we have the good fortune of having worked with each other for a long time. Our team is also very established, and the people who've worked on the team have been here for decades plus. I mean, really, and that makes a big difference, because you know each other, and you can have a strong argument or a discussion, and then still you're okay the next day, because it's collegial. It's based around a topic. It's not personal. And also, I think we're all very curious individuals, so encouraging that curiosity to kind of get the perspective from your teammates, to listen to them, trying to build those discussions is pretty much our main purpose. We've also just started in our Zoom meetings having like friendly little like chats about kind of nothing at the beginning. I mean, that sounds like such a silly thing, but we introduce, like, each week we have a question, like a random question someone brings to the meeting, like what was your favorite childhood pet or something. Or, I mean, this sounds like such a gimmick, but I don't know, maybe Erica can say, I think that's also nice because it starts to make you see each other as people a little bit. When you're so far apart from each other, I mean, our team is all over the world, our editorial team, we're everywhere. And just getting to know each other as people. And then normally we see each other once a year. The company actually meets once a year and has an event for a week where everyone comes together. And there's a lot of meetings, but there's also just a lot of downtime where we can go do something together or have dinner or have a chat. I think that's really important, is to work on building relationships beyond even the work. But then it makes everything a little simpler because you see each other as people.
I love that. I think that's, again, in so much of what we do, sometimes that human element of how people come together to create great things gets totally overlooked, because we get so excited about how great the thing is, and we want to talk about the awesome thing that's been created, and we kind of forget that in that process were people that had to put things aside or communicate or agree on things to make all of this amazing stuff happen later.
Well, and we shore each other up. Just in the last couple of weeks, I've swapped a copy edit with a colleague. I sent an abstract to one colleague where I felt I had maybe over-edited it and overworked it, and would he take a look at it and give me some feedback? I mean, we do these kinds of things all the time. We really, despite the distance, have forged a real team.
Awesome. I think the one thing that really stands out to me is that willingness to have someone else maybe sort of go, oh, actually, I think you've misstepped here, or this was a mistake, or we should consider changing that, and just being willing to have that open back and forth. I think it's difficult, right? To a certain extent, it's stepping back and going, hey, I am proud of this, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. It can always be better, right? I think that There's so much there that I think so many L&D teams, certainly that I've worked in the past, can learn from and take away, and really, I think it would just improve so many elements of practice if we were to work a little bit more like that, or certainly bring elements of that in. So on that note, let's sort of think about my fellow instructional designers and L&D folk out there watching this right now. Writing summaries, I don't want to say it was the bane of my career in in-house L&D. It was the element of every project I did not look forward to, because it was really difficult. Like, you've just spent this time getting the SME to agree to cover these key points that are really important, and now I have to tell them, now I'm going to slim it down even more, because we've delivered it. We don't need to deliver the whole thing again. So what kind of advice would you give? Because obviously it's a slightly different context, right? Writing abstracts versus summarizing learning experiences. But I strongly suspect there are some key overlapping skills here. What advice would you be giving to us in L&D to write really great summaries?
I think I can start with a few things, and I'm sure Eric can always add something. I think the first thing I always ask myself when I was working on a summary, and maybe this then applies to instructional design as well, is I think, what was this book trying to do? Was it trying to teach someone this lesson? Was it trying to enlighten someone about this topic? What was the point of the book? And then everything in the summary has to go in that direction. So there's a lot of side stories in books. Often they can have a little tangent here or there, and that's everything you have to leave out. You have to make sure your summary has the same target as the book. So that's, if you're doing that, things start to fall into place. Questions about, do I keep this in or do I not, is that they become easier if you think whether or not they're meeting that target. And then I think also just really using simple language. That's something we have to learn to, or sort of unlearn, is using jargon and sort of like fancy terms. What we always try to do when we're writing is just use really simple language. Anywhere we can, eliminate jargon, make it simple, clear, tell it to me like I'm a kid, like I can understand it. Because when you're reading quickly and you want to pick something up, that language, that's exactly what you want. You know, you don't want to throw a term in there that might stop someone for even a second. I think that's really important, is being careful about language. And I don't know if it applies for instructional design, but what I always try to do with a summary is keep in at least one storytelling element. So one good example, or one little sort of, just one little bit that might kind of get someone's interest, or demonstrate a concept nicely, or just a quirky bit, because people remember those things. They stick with them. And that's something you can afterwards kind of think back and go, oh yeah, that was a little lesson in there. So always trying to keep a little bit of something in there. Maybe Erica also has some other good points. Huh?
I think that you hit the main points. It really has to be clear. There can't be anything in an abstract where a reader has to stop and say, what do you mean? And our abstracts are read as audios. It has to work on the ear as well as on the eye. And we do supply abstracts to our in-house instructional designers. And maybe should have had one of them with us, but Heather knows a lot about that. I do know that when I hear from the instructional design team that works on our classes, on our micro classes, they're very interested in the most specific information we can give them, and things that they can translate into hands-on, visceral experiences that readers can draw from. So one of the things we're doing is we might cover 50 leadership books this year. They have to read differently, not just as books, but as abstracts. There's a core lesson in there that isn't just leaders are honest and they care. That's 5 or 6 levels down in terms of what specific leadership things that book is going to bring to the reader, and to whatever instruction we can take from it.
I love that. I think, so much of that is, I think, really useful, really clarifying, to kind of get us to really focus in on what's important. Because I know a lot of summaries and courses that I have written. I will be the sacrificial goat of L&D on this one, and just say I have written a lot of summaries that are basically bullet points of the key learning points of the course, and that's about all you get. So because the first thing I would do is strip out things like stories, because they're bulky, and we tend to assume summary means short, therefore cut out everything that isn't absolutely essential, actionable information. But when I think about it, you're exactly right. It makes summaries probably as dull, summaries like that, as dull to read as I don't look forward to writing them.
Well, we do
So
say that it's not getOutline.
I like that. That's that may end up being in the title. Let us know in the comments if that finds its way into the title. No, I think there's loads there that we can potentially action, especially that focus on that deeper level of information. Because so often it's easy to write a course if you keep things generic and high level. It's much more difficult to write for the context in which you are delivering this, and how does the person go and do something with this information. And I think that really applies in L&D, is there are enough generic courses that say a lot but mean nothing, and we really want to try and move on from those. So I think there's been an awful lot just in this so far. Maybe a little bit of a more general question, specifically about getAbstract, because I mean, people will know on this channel we've had a look at getAbstract before, and I found it to be really interesting. And one of the reasons that I found it particularly interesting is, unlike a lot of alternative platforms, it wasn't just books. There were podcasts and papers. That really, the kind of journal entries, that really surprised and pleased me, because for a long time we have a big problem with this in L&D of people go, oh, how do I learn? It's like, you're going to have to read some scientific papers. Unfortunately, they're written for people who are meant to read scientific papers, and for most instructional designers, that ain't us. So we spend a lot of time doing exactly what you said, picking up a dictionary or going to Google and going, what on earth does this sentence mean? And yeah, that as soon as that happens once or twice, no one's going to carry on reading it in our field. It gets put to one side, and we end up with learning styles sticking around for another generation. So I'm quite interested, what drove that, and what's different when you're looking at like a paper or a podcast versus a book, because they're very different mediums in my mind. I'm interested to know if they're different from an abstract perspective.
No, that's a great question. I remember when I started at getAbstract, it's just when we started with the what we call the 2-page library, which is articles, podcasts. We did reports before that, economic reports, and videos. And I also thought in the beginning, okay, well, these are shorter content. Like, how are we doing this? But for reports, it especially makes a lot of sense. I mean, we do reports from the World Economic Forum, for example, and they're huge. They can be 50 to 100 pages long, filled with content, really overwhelming, pretty dry most of the time. Like, I mean, not to dampen the World Economic Forum, but
they're written for their audience, aren't they?
That's And a manager at a business or a leader might need to understand the economic situation at the moment or where things are going, and they're not an expert in that. So we're always trying to make things accessible. I think accessibility is so important, and that's what we can really do with a lot of the short form content. Also video and podcasts. I mean, long form podcasts are over an hour of someone speaking or a group of people speaking, and you might just need the lessons of 5 minutes of that. But how are you going to scan through that and find exactly what you need, or even just finding the right podcast, because there are so many, is a huge task. And that's also something we see with the short form library is so valuable, is that we're curating content where there's just an enormous amount of it on the internet. I mean, books, okay, you get publishing lists every year, like Simon & Schuster or HarperCollins, what's coming out. But everything else, there's so much, there's just noise. So we see the value there is also finding the right content, making it accessible quickly, and then being up to date, because the stuff is coming out as things are happening often. And books take 1 year to 2 years to come out. A topic might be so fresh, we want something immediately for our users or our readers online. They don't want to hear about it in 2 years when someone's written a book about ChatGPT. And the short form library lets us do that really quickly. So I think there's so many nice aspects of that content.
Brilliant. Well, look, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I think there's tons of value here. Question, just to wrap everything up and bring us to an exciting close with some recommendations for people that you're probably completely unprepared for. If you're only able to recommend one book each that you think people should go and read, something that's really impressed you, or that, you know, or that's on your read list and you haven't got to it yet, but you're excited to get there, what would you send people to?
I will tell you that our top download forever is 7 Habits.
Yeah.
People just really rely on that book. It's a great entry point. It's a great reminder of the basics. I also think there are certain authors that people rely on. Patrick Leoncini, John Maxwell, people who come out with something new every 2 or 3 years. They're you relate to them. You understand how they're going to approach something. I think people turn to that. Malcolm Gladwell. There's several authors where they're going to be important when they come out. And then beyond that, we're looking for the books from the professional press where Barrett Kohler and some of the publishers that really talk to within fields. We're looking for those books that we can make, as Heather said, applicable and accessible.
And Heather, from you?
Yeah, I'll just recommend one that I read recently because it sticks out. I mean, I have classics I like, including the Classics Library, which I used to be the managing editor of. That's a small little niche of our library.
Yeah, but we love it.
I know, me too. But which is actually classic literature. We have a small library of that. But for L&D people, I think the book that I'm reading at the moment and the summary we have that I love is How People Learn by Nick Shackleton-Jones. I think this is just really, for me, it just really piqued my interest as well, especially as also the mother of a child in the education system and someone who's interested in how adults learn. I just think it's a really fascinating read. So that's the latest one I would recommend.
I would definitely back that recommendation.
Yeah.
I think I think whenever his books come out, or whenever he puts a blog, to be honest, it becomes almost required reading to operate in our industry. So I think, it's a really great place, and especially because I know a lot of people they tune into these videos when they're getting into the industry. You couldn't go far wrong starting there, to be perfectly honest. Well, thank you both so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And there will be links, obviously, in the description down below about where you can learn more about getAbstract, what they do. You know from the previous video, I'm a user, love it, use it all the time. So highly recommended. And we shall see you in the next video.